Have you struggled to drive actual business results with your email marketing and newsletter? Have you seen other businesses or creators push out amazing newsletters that drive all kinds of traffic and revenue and wondered how did they build such a successful marketing tactic? What are the keys to establishing a newsletter that drives results? What MarTech solutions do you need? And what are some best practices? Well, that's what we're covering in today's episode of the MarTech Show.
The past is gone. Now's the future.
This is the MarTech Show, exploring today's marketing technology solutions. Social media, artificial intelligence, augmented reality,
Now's the future.
content, SEO, email, analytics, listening, advertising, and more. I'm your host, Mike Allton, and I'm joined by agency owner and technology futurist Robin Dimond. Each episode explores the latest developments in marketing technology and shares new solutions and innovative approaches that you need to know about to grow your business today. And now, the rest of today's episode. All right, welcome back to the MarTech Show, where Robin and I get to dish on what's shiny and new in the MarTech space, then do a deep dive into a specific platform or solution that can help you in your business today. Hey, Robin, how are you doing?
Fantastic.
So good to have you. Welcome back, my friend. Now, last week, we both had the pleasure of attending and hanging out at EEE, the E-commerce Experience Evolution event, or is it E-commerce Evolution Experience? I don't know. I kept getting it mixed up, but it's Triple E, and it was cool, and it was in Miami. What did you think of the event? What were some of your takeaways?
Honestly, I thought it was an incredible event to see and to hear all the new things that are coming out. I know we got a chance to talk so many times, but like it really caught just my eye about like what Google's doing, what, Meta's doing, to hear some of the speakers that were there. Like, I mean, we got to hear a shark, from Shark Tank. Like it was pretty powerful.
Yeah. For those who aren't aware, she was talking about the Damon Johns from the TV show Shark Tank. And I had to admit, I've never watched Shark Tank. I am familiar with the show premise. I get it, but I've never actually watched it. So I really didn't know what to expect with Damon Johns. And he absolutely blew me away. I was so impressed with his style, the content that he delivered, his approach to not just business, but marketing and life overall. It was really impactful for me.
I felt like it was authentic. I thought we learned a lot too. I love seeing the data that was coming through, and to see how like the customer experience has changed so much. And as a marketer who also believes in data and technology, just like yourself, it was impressive to see the data that's coming through and how people are shopping completely different. And so that we just all learned all of these things our whole career. It just changed again. And I think that's exciting about what we do, to be marketers in technology, but it's really powerful of what was coming out there and the new things that are starting to be talked about.
Yeah. In fact, I got to be honest too, that I came into that event. My goal there was networking. My goal there was spending time with you and meeting you and meeting some of the speakers and the other partners and sponsors. And I wasn't anticipating getting a lot out of the content because I'm not an e-commerce retail brand. But I sat there, you and I sat there through all the sessions. They were fantastic. And I found myself writing down all kinds of notes, all kinds of ideas and takeaways that even though the presenters were talking about it from a very, very specific retail and e-commerce perspective, I was like, oh, that applies to me in my B2B SaaS company. That applies to me in my blog and that sort of thing. So it was super impactful from that perspective as well.
I think my phone has more screenshots of just like the slides that they were giving us, and I haven't deleted them to even go through it. So it was really powerful, really exciting, cool things to see coming out. Yes, I went for the networking, but like to have that extra double-edged sword to come out and see some of our other partners that we've just had on the show 2 weeks ago, like BigCommerce being there, Feedonomics. Like there was a lot of relationship building, but also really cool to see what's happening in the space.
Yeah. So one great takeaway for all of you watching and listening is to definitely carve out time to attend events like that and give yourself the space to network, but also listen and think. So now listen, paid marketing, influencer marketing, even social media marketing, they're all dependent on other people's channels. One channel that businesses own and can control is that of email marketing. You own your email list and you control the message, the tone, and the frequency that you reach out to that list, which sounds great. But what are we supposed to do with that? How do we actually get good results from our email marketing? Well, that's exactly what Casey Hill is going to talk to us about. Casey's been in the MarTech space for over a decade, focused on helping companies scale fast, whether it's garnering millions of views on Quora and LinkedIn or pioneering new growth levers like booking his team on hundreds of podcasts. Casey's always looking for creative and value-led ways to grab attention and break from the mold, and he serves as the senior manager of growth for ActiveCampaign. They sport the email marketing, marketing automation, CRM tools that you're going to need to create incredible customer experiences. Hey, Casey, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, great to be here.
So glad to have you. Now, for those who aren't familiar, Casey, can you tell us more about ActiveCampaign and how it helps marketers today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to start with the boring answer. The boring answer is that ActiveCampaign is a marketing automation and CRM tool. And I realize for folks that are listening, I've been in the MarTech world for 10 years, that there is hundreds of solutions that kind of fit this bill. So I could go down the rabbit hole of like specific features and differentiations, but I think that'd be less valuable than just kind of setting a little bit of the stage of who is this typically best for, right? And also when I migrated over at my last startup, kind of why we did that. So normally we find that when people get started into email marketing, they jump onto a basic newsletter tool. It might be a tool like a MailChimp, a ConvertKit, a Beehive. They want to be able to connect with the audience and send out some email. But oftentimes over time, they start to realize they need a little bit more. They'd love to maybe track some relationships. That's where a visual CRM could be valuable. Maybe they want to have a couple integrations that play a little bit more nicely with that existing tech. Maybe they want to have a little bit more dynamic content. And for those reasons, they start to look at a new tool. But a lot of times the jump to go to something like HubSpot, which can be very pricey, is a lot. And there's this huge portion of people that exist in the middle of that market where they've outgrown a very basic tool. They want something a little bit more robust, but they don't want to pay enterprise pricing. So that's kind of where ActiveCampaign fits in. And in 2020, I was working at a startup named Bonjoro running growth for them. And we were using MailChimp for our email side. We were using HubSpot free CRM for our CRM side. And the reason we migrated over was to have that one central hub where we could operate our email and our CRM under one roof. So we didn't have to have lots of different systems. And all the tools that we used, our Calendly system, our segment integration, all of those were native, pre-built, and kind of already connected in with the system. So I think that is kind of the sweet spot of where ActiveCampaign exists and what we do in the market.
Awesome. Awesome. Robin, you got a question for him?
I do. I mean, it's powerful what you do. And nowadays we talk about relationships, and you just said like, you need to follow someone throughout their journey. Can you tell us like at a high level, like how do marketing agencies and clients use you and how does it work?
Yeah, for sure. So it's used in a couple different applications, but essentially the idea is oftentimes to start out, you want to have some place where you can capture demand. So with a tool like ActiveCampaign, you can spin up forms, you can spin up landing pages, and you can capture folks that might be interested in your services, in your products. After that, you have a whole set of automations that you can run. And an automation essentially means instead of just sending a one-off email, you can send an email and then you can say, hey, and after a week, I might want to send another email. If they buy, I might want to pull them off of that flow so they don't keep getting messages if they've already taken an action. I might want to divide and have different people get different types of content based on what they're interested in. So there's a lot of different ways you can kind of get creative. And I think over the course of this show, I'm excited to kind of get very granular with those specific actionable bits. But just to kind of set the stage at a high level, it's bringing people in, it's nurturing those relationships so you can drive more business. And then it's finding ways to maintain those relationships over time, keep those people engaged so they'll continue to buy more, and you can have that kind of expanding revenue coming from that existing customer base as well.
I love that you
Yes.
mentioned being able to segment users, because that's, to me, like that's like one of the advanced things about email marketing that a lot of people don't know about, or maybe even some of the tools don't do or do well. What are some of the other important considerations when it comes to newsletters and email marketing?
Yeah, I think when you're thinking about your newsletters, the way that I often think about this is that most people drive revenue from email in like one of three primary ways. So the first way is what I call bottom of funnel style of content. Bottom of funnel style of content is you're trying to drive conversions. So here, think of the promos, think of the specialty offers, think of sending people comparison articles. We at ActiveCampaign, we drive millions of dollars in revenue from what I would call bottom of funnel content. We might send them to a good third party resource that talks about deliverability and features us well. So one bucket of monetization is you're trying to drive direct revenue through with a group that already has high intent. The second bucket is you're trying to use something like email to build pipeline. So you're talking about something that's topical, that's related directly to the product. So in our case, it might be like you could have an example, best email we've seen this month, right? And we could feature that and break it down and talk through the dynamics of what made that email convert well. That's obviously very applicable to our audience, but we're not bottom of funnel. We're not just saying, go get active campaign. We're trying to build that thought leadership and authority to create that more top of funnel pipeline. So bucket number one, bottom of funnel drive conversions. Bucket number two, build that pipeline over time and use that as a channel that then eventually can become revenue. And the third way that we see people typically driving revenue with that email strategy, which is kind of a little bit of an emerging field, is what I would call kind of the owned asset play. So here it's basically the idea that if you build a newsletter, some sort of asset that you own to 10,000, 50,000 subscribers, even if it's slightly tangential from your core product line. So again, using Active Campaign, what if we started a newsletter where we talked about hybrid work, where we talked about should you use freelancers, all these different things that aren't directly related to our product, but if we grow that asset very large, we can then advertise in it. We can take sponsors in it. It becomes something in and of itself that we can use to drive revenue. So I think the first thing when it comes to email strategy is having a very clear goal and expectation of what the purpose of the asset is. Email has changed so much and our inboxes are so flooded that if your newsletter or your email marketing strategy is an amalgamation of a million different things, here's some product updates, and on top of that, here's some company things that we're doing, and here's some use cases, that is not going to be what actually drives revenue. So I think at the very beginning, when you set the stage, it's like, choose what that specific goal is. Is it to build pipeline? Is it to drive direct sales? Is it to build an owned asset you can advertise in? That's step one. Once you get below that, then I think you start to get into some of the tactical pieces that really make email work effectively. So one of those is you want to have a very clear expectation to reality match. So if you look at a lot of the top newsletters, one of the things you'll find is they say, expect to hear from us every Friday at 8 a.m. PST about insert whatever they're talking about. It's very specific. They're not only setting the stage of what they're talking about, but they're setting the stage of exactly when they're going to reach out to you. That's super important for maximizing that engagement and building that consistent expectation. If you send your newsletter, one day you send it on a Friday, and then 3 weeks later you send it on a Tuesday, your engagement is going to be way lower. You haven't set that expectation. People aren't anticipating, and that is going to fundamentally be a problem. So I think at a high level, it's like we set a goal, then we set a clear expectation. And then when you're actually reaching out, kind of tied to that clear expectation, don't try to do too much. Keep that newsletter focused on one, maybe two calls to action. And by doing that, you're going to basically not bastardize the impact of that newsletter. Because if you have 7 different places you're sending people, you're going to find that you're just going to drive less traffic overall, because there's kind of the analysis paralysis, if you will, of that. So I think that is another kind of important piece as you're kind of creating the scaffolding. In terms of personalization, I think it's also really critical to make sure that you're gathering relevant things that you can personalize based on. So on intake, sometimes people are scared. They say, oh, we don't know if we should gather information up front. We don't want to scare people off. I encourage people to go look at the Morning Brew. Go look at a lot of the most successful newsletters out there, and you'll find that they do ask questions up front. So they have the ability to segment and to personalize. So I think it's having that goal, bringing people in, really nailing down that personalization bit, and then even fostering or even asking openly for specific targeted questions that people will respond back can be another signal that helps you keep that list super engaged. So still kind of a little bit of the high level view, but that's some of the ways I would think about how you're monetizing that email strategy.
Casey, you just I don't know if anybody was listening to that, take that was like $1 million value right there for someone in their business. I don't even know how to unpack. There's so many things. I think one of the things that you said that stood out was it's like an onion. Email marketing has now become there's so many layers to it. It is not just a set it and forget it anymore. Personalization, there is a very loud, noisy world. It's just like social media. It's a loud, noisy world. I'm filtered through so many things every single day. Same with emails. I think they said at EE, you get 300 emails a day on average.
Yeah.
That's insane. So letting me know, it's just like a relationship. If you let me know when you're calling me, I'm not thinking about that or I'm not getting annoyed by that. It's personalization. And you talked about personalization, but if we take that into friendship, which is what you're trying to build with your customers, that you get to know them personally. And I'm like, I don't want an email every Friday, or maybe I do, but now I know that it's coming and it's something that I look forward to. And I'm like, oh, okay, it's not too much. They told me about it. So I think there's unpacking all the things that you just said. It's really important. And I think for some business owners or agencies, we just keep doing the same thing. It's like a hamster wheel. And it's like send more emails or do this. And there's nothing personal. And in our relationships nowadays, that's what people want. People are looking for something totally different. That's what they kept saying at EE. They're looking for something totally different. Give me something that stands out. And I love what you all are doing. I think it's really, really helpful. I know all the benefits. So I guess the question that we have for you are, what are the risks if you're doing too much automation? Is there something that an agency or an owner needs to know about the risk of too much automation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can definitely overdo email. You can overdo pretty much any of these channels. There's the sweet spot depending on what you're trying to do. Like I spent a lot of time, and I've been in this space for a long time, studying kind of like what are those ideal frequencies, what are those ideal tempos. And the honest answer is it does depend. It can be very different by industry. What I found for onboarding flows, for example, is to not have more than 4 touch points within the first 2 weeks, or else we see conversions starting to dip quite a bit. So that's like one thing that we've looked at a whole bunch of different brands, and we studied how often were they connecting with people. And that's any type of correspondence other than just like the double opt-in, confirm your email. Any time that went over 4 emails, even if they were personalized, we started to see the impact of conversion dipping quite a bit. And similarly, if they only had, say, 1 touch point, we found that was often less effective than having 2 to 3 touch points, especially if one of those was like kind of general setup and then one of those was personalized or catered to them. I'm reluctant to kind of give a global, like, you should message people at this frequency, because there's some great brands. Like you look at, again, I mentioned the Morning Brew. The Morning Brew messages people every single freaking day, and they have a ton of success. And then you have other brands that do it on a weekly basis, other brands that do it on a monthly basis. I would say the biggest thing is just to keep the quality bar high. Don't just check a box. I mean, one of the things that you were kind of noting, and I think it's a really good point to emphasize, is so many people do kind of checkbox marketing in general. I check box, I'm supposed to have a blog. Check box, I'm supposed to post this many times. I strongly encourage folks, spend the time, add specific data, really get into the weeds. There is so much noise in the inbox that the stuff that ends up being really successful are things that are very, very tailored. Imagine you're a brand, you're an e-commerce brand, and you are at 1 million in GMV. And you get a newsletter that says how this brand went from 1 to 10 million GMV. And it's a perfect parallel to your brand. You're going to open that all day. And if that has specific details that break down and get into the weeds, that's going to be incredibly impactful. If you get an email that says how this brand went from 1 billion to 3 billion, probably not as relevant to you, right? You might not open that because it's really not connected to where you're at. So that is when we talk about personalization, finding out where that person's at, what they value, tailoring the content to it. I think that is super, super critical. And I'm also a huge fan, because sometimes people ask me, Casey, how do I balance all these things? I got all these social things I'm trying to do. I want to have a newsletter. I want to have a blog. Instead of trying to operate all of those independently, I encourage folks to find out, like, what is your best content, the deepest research, the most firsthand experience you can share. Write that down and then repurpose that across these different channels. That can be a newsletter episode. That can be a post on LinkedIn or a post on Reddit. There's all these different ways that you can use that content in multiple different formats to maximize the blueprint. I just shared a story actually on my LinkedIn today about a post about Reddit IPOing that got 3,000 views on LinkedIn and got 250,000 views just reposting and resharing that across multiple socials. And so in the same vein with email, you can take your very best content on these other platforms. And if your goal is top of funnel, again, going back to that goal, you want to be specific with your goal. If your goal is top of funnel pipeline generation, that can be a great place to plug that in.
Such a great point about repurposing. I do that with my own newsletter. I write a long form newsletter every Sunday, and then the following Saturday, that most of that content gets republished as a blog post. So it's available for people to read, whether they were a subscriber back then or not. We've got a question from our community manager, Deb Mitchell. She asked, "Would you recommend doing those newsletters email style, like a letter, or in sections with different info?"
Yeah, so I'm not sure that is that question asking like kind of like a plain text layout versus like a templated build? Is
Yeah.
that how you guys are interpreting that question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Would you just do a long form, article, letter, blog post where you're just writing in prose, or are you going to divide it up into different sections?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the most important thing is you want content to be really skimmable. So what I do is I run a test and I say, what can you derive from what this is about within 5 seconds of looking at it? So I like to give people specific examples. There's a newsletter done by a company called Mutiny. Mutiny does a really good job of they have a recap at the top and they say, we're going to talk about these 4 things. And then they have clear headers in each section breaking down what that person's going to get. If you're kind of looking at what exactly does that look like, go opt into that newsletter so you can get a sense of that formatting. But I think skimmability, no matter what mode you go, is really ideal. I've actually spent a lot of time studying and looking at data between plain text versus templated. And the honest answer is, I know it's frustrating to hit people with the depends. It depends. It depends on the industry. It depends on the specific goals that you have. And so I would, number one, your core content is always more important than anything else, right? Like I'm talking to you about Active Campaign, I'm talking to you about template. Like no matter what email tool you use, no matter whether you use plain text or whether you use template, focus first on having that really high quality in-depth content. That's number one. Second, run split tests. That's the beauty of having these tools that have the sophistication is you can just say, I'm not sure whether this would do better as plain text or with a little bit of stylization and maybe a little bit of my brand coloration and breaking down some sections with those visual components. So run it 50-50. Test it with 50% of your audience one way, 50% of the audience the other way. Look at that data and learn not what some outside guru is telling you for your brand, but actually what the experience is with those customers. That's how I would think about it.
I love that advice. I'm a writer, so I tend to write a lot, and my emails are quite long, but I could definitely add that kind of a section at the beginning. I appreciate that. So if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Casey Hill about effective and profitable email marketing and managing responses to emails. And I want to share with you a story of how the Fracture brand stays on top of social media responses and management.
Fracture is a company out of Gainesville, Florida, founded on the belief that the printed image has a lot of power. We wanted to make it as absolutely simple as possible for people to take photos from being buried in their camera roll on their phones to being something they can celebrate on their walls. Originally, we essentially were doing a lot of manual social media management. And then as the company grew, we started to try different platforms for social media management and marketing. Most of the ones that we used, we were somewhat satisfied with, but never found something that really addressed everything that we needed. We use Agorapulse for our social media marketing. It's really fantastic because it allows us to connect the marketing side of what we do with our customer support. We now use Agorapulse to easily assign support requests as soon as it comes in. Agorapulse has really allowed our company to expand and upgrade our social media management abilities. I think that smart marketers nowadays are constantly on the lookout for new companies like Agorapulse who are able to deliver the same kind of results in a leaner way that ends up saving you money.
Casey, you touched on personalization a bit before, but I'd love for you to impact that even more because I need everybody listening and watching to understand that it's more than just being able to insert somebody's first name. So in your mind, what can be personalized and specifically, where does Active Campaign help with that?
Yeah, first off, I love this question. I'm so glad you asked this because personalization is such a funny thing. Everyone talks about personalization, but I've been behind the hood. And so I know how many people actually do any meaningful personalization, and it's really small. So the question is everyone's talking personalized, and then they're not personalizing. So the first question is, why is that? Well, you need to have things that you can personalize based on. So the first recommendation I have for folks is don't be scared to ask one or two questions when people are coming into something like your newsletter to be able to personalize that experience. I talked to so many brands who are like, no, we couldn't ask people. It would scare people away. There's a couple ways you can address that. Number one, you can use progressive profiling, which something like Typeforms, there's lots of ways you could do this, where essentially you capture their email first, then they hit next, and then it might ask them these subsequent questions. By doing that, you make sure that you get as many people through the door as possible, but you can capture then those additional personalization questions. So first thing is on intake. See if you can actually gather some information that will help you curate that journey. The other question that comes in is, well, what do I personalize on? Should it be industry? Should it be role? Should it be company size? Here, I think you need to really know your audience and know what is functionally the most relevant to that person who's coming through. So, for example, is a 10,000 person e-commerce company more similar to a 10,000 person B2B company than, say, a 10 person e-commerce company? If the answer is yes, then maybe it's company size. Maybe company size is going to be the most relevant because permissions and these different functionalities that will tie into that. Or maybe no, there's a lot of functionality and features that's specifically based on industry, right? And so then maybe that is what is most impactful or helpful. So I think when you start out, it's about getting that relevant information. And so I call that kind of like the static segmentation. I'm going to gather information and divide people based on it. And it's really easy in tools like ActiveCampaign to just have a simple fork where you say, I ask people, let's say company size, ask people company size, and then I can have 3 paths, each one of those tailored to what size someone is. And I can send them, maybe the rest of the flow is the same, but there's just like 1 or 2 different emails. Super easy for you to basically create that and set it up. The second side of personalization is what I call dynamic or behavioral segmentation. So this is, you want to treat how people are interfacing with you differently. If someone opens 1 email a year, they're not the same as the person who's opening every single one of your correspondences. And we won't go down the rabbit hole of email deliverability and all those different kind of components. What I can tell you is it is actively hurting you as a brand and your sending reputation to be hitting people over the head with emails who aren't opening, who aren't engaging. And so what I would do is I would find those people who are most engaged, and I would keep that high tempo of engaging those people with lots of great high value content. And for folks who are colder, space it out. Spend more time sending emails out to those folks because you don't want those people to be adversely affecting that reputation. And maybe you save reaching out when you have that really, the cornerstone study or that super valuable piece of information that you can do. And in the same way, one of the things that's really awesome about a tool like ActiveCampaign is we have something called goals. So a lot of tools are basically limited to what we call a static segmentation. And so essentially that person hits a step and it says, is this true? Yes or no? Send an email, wait 5 days. Did they open it? Yes or no? A lot of the basic email tools operate like this. With ActiveCampaign, you can say, anytime someone does a behavior, let's say opens 3 emails in a row, take them to this point. And then you can start them on that very active, engaged drip. So to take a step back, because I know I'm throwing a whole bunch of information at people, I would say 2 things. Gather information up front and then segment people based on that. And then also look at the behaviors of people. Are they visiting landing pages? Are they opening your content? Are they clicking on specific links? And from there, you can also send them the most relevant content. And it's easy in tools like ActiveCampaign to even do things like lead scoring. So you can essentially say, hey, if someone opens an email, 1 point. If they click on a link, 3 points. If they go to certain, like my pricing page, maybe that's 10 points. And so you can start to create profiles of your most engaged users and use that as a way to know how to target the right folks.
That's so cool, isn't it, Robin?
It really is. And Casey, I feel like if we just took you out of email and we replaced the word with relationships or people, 100% get to know people. That's really what personalization, and that's what you're doing. You're getting to know them. And I think people are afraid to ask their client, but I got to know you before this show. I know Mike, I know what he likes to eat. That's so important to know those things because that helps you have a better relationship. Same with your clients, same with the people who are opening it. You want to know what their activities are. And if we replace it with people, because that's what is behind these emails, that's going to how your brand is going to stand out. They're going to relate to these. They're going to know, okay, Robin's not opening this email at all. Her reading comprehension is 3rd grade. Her mother, though, opens every single one, clicks on every single link, and then screen captures it. And you've got 2 totally different ones, and it helps you serve that as a better purpose. And I think that's so I don't hit the unsubscribe button. I don't hit the it's annoying and I ruin your reputation. You're going to hit me once in a while. And I think it's just really getting to know, okay, Robin might be a little bit more active. This other woman, Rochelle, is retired and she has more time. And so like getting to know those people and personalizing it. I love how you guys do that. You really, really, really help to get to know the client, and that shows your results immediately.
Yeah. And also
there was no question. I'm just supporting everything you said. I'm like, yes. It's about relationships, and that's what you're talking about, personalization. And I think we try to complicate it so much when it's so simple. And just ask people. They're going to tell you. Yes, I like these things. No, I don't. People want to feel like the Kardashians. They want to feel asked. They want to feel important. So when you ask that as a brand, it helps you really, really segment or automate those.
100%. And I would say, just to build off that too, like, don't be afraid to ask questions even. So I was talking about kind of like the form level, but in first touches, in that first email you send out to folks, don't be afraid to ask them specific targeted questions too. So a good example of a question would be like, what is the biggest hurdle that you're having with SEM PPC ads right now? It's very specific. And this is a nuance that's important for folks. That question is infinitely better than, if you have any questions, please let us know, right? That is so broad. Someone's like, I could go a million different places, right? Even it's even as basic as something where when someone asks for a review, we've run a lot of research. If you're like, can you go give me a review on this specific Google place or this specific directory? It'll be way better than if you're just like, can you give us a review? Person's like, I don't know where. Like, it's just so open-ended. So when you look at an email strategy and you look at what's going to help you potentially land in that primary inbox, not get pulled into promotions, which, by the way, is very challenging in email today. The bar is very high to hit a primary inbox. But what I can tell you guys is the people that run these inboxes, they're smart. And the way the algorithm, one of the biggest things they prioritized in the last algorithm change is reply rate. Because they studied and they said, when you send emails to your friends and your family, those have like an 80% reply rate. When you send emails that are like marketing-based emails, you maybe have like a 2% reply rate. So it's a super easy signal where they're like, oh, okay, we can find out if you are marketing and move you into promotions with that. And it was a while back when a lot of these top creators, I remember having a conversation with Pat Flynn of SPI back in the day, who was producing content around this. And they started to really study it. And they found that if they could get 20, 30% reply rate in that first email by asking specific targeted questions, they were starting to hit primary folders. And I've now looked at that across a ton of different industries and found that same correlation. So let people know the expectation of when they're going to hear from you. That's going to increase that open rate. And then from that, really focus on replies. A way that I like to tell people in terms of how to prioritize email metrics, the least important is opens. Then above that is clicks. Then above that is page views. And at the very top is replies. So there's been a lot of changes in email that have happened. We're seeing right now Google and Yahoo have new authentication changes. We saw the Apple auto open changes that happened. I believe that was last year, where all of these people were scrambling because they were like, now can I not use open as a trigger? So a couple things I'll note on that. Number one, cool feature, shameless plug for ActiveCampaign. We divide out Apple auto opens and we actually show you, of your 48% open rate, 20% of those were Apple auto opens. So you actually can get a sense of what percentage of those people. The second thing though is I encourage folks to focus on clicks, focus on page views, focus on replies as a much more reliable and better trigger if you're trying to run some sort of automation than an open. Because the last thing you want to do is have someone auto open hit and then you run an automation that was like, I'm so glad that you were interested in XYZ. And the person's like, what are you talking about? I never read that content. Like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I think that's, if you're looking at like what metrics to follow, like keep that little like greater than diagram in your head. I think that'll help you prioritize the right things for trying to ultimately drive as much revenue as possible.
That makes complete sense. And I want you to underline this for those of us listening who maybe haven't done it before, but you can set up links in your newsletters and you can segment based on which links people click, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's say, for example, that as part, and again, I want to reiterate that I encourage people to be pretty focused, but let's just say you have your core message or offering, and after that, you include your blog. and you just want to know who's actually interested in the blog content. And you see there's a small cohort of people that consistently are always consuming your blog content. Well, what I would do is I would have an automation that's basically just set up and says, hey, if someone checks out more than 2 to 3 of my blog articles, let's start having that be something where maybe I just send a whole recap of top 3 blog articles from X period of time. They're clearly interested in that type of content. Let's feed them more of that. Similarly, someone who got 10 emails from me that always included the blog, they never clicked on the blog a single time. Okay, no worries. That's not something they're interested in. Let's keep it tailored. Let's actually pull that out entirely if that's not something that they want to engage in. I think it's really, really important when people are thinking about this. I tell people, don't be afraid of unsubscribes. I know it sounds weird. People are like, well, what are you saying? You want to maximize your email reputation. You want people that want to hear from you. Some people will come to me, oh, Casey, like we had all these unsubscribes or whatever. I'm like, okay, no worries. That's
Casey,
good.
say
Like,
that again. Just say it one more time. We just need you to just shout it a little bit louder for the people in the back who didn't hear that. What was it? What did you say?
Yeah, don't be afraid of unsubscribes. Really don't be afraid of unsubscribes. And what I would say is it's also an opportunity for you to learn. One of the things, I've run countless newsletters myself, personally, for brands and different things that I launch alongside companies. And I use that also as a signal. If I send out an email blast and that email blast gets 50 unsubscribes, and on average, my email blast gets 3 unsubscribes, I spend some time saying, oh, what did I do? Like, why do people not like that content? Like, was there something clickbaity? Did I lose some trust there? So not only is it important to kind of learn about what people want to get from it, but also it's one of those things that you can educate yourself through as well.
100%. And one of the things you mentioned earlier that I just thought was fascinating was lead scoring. Email marketing solutions like ActiveCampaign have come a long way in recent years. What else can marketers do today? Things like lead scoring that are going to improve their newsletters and they're going to improve their audience engagement.
Yeah, there's so many individual pieces, but I'll focus in on a couple. So first is I think you want to really lean into system intelligence and kind of AI optimization. And what I mean by that specifically is there's stuff like we talked about lead scoring. Over time, lead scoring is also going to get better and better, where these systems will start prompting you and telling you how many points you should assign. There's also things that already exist like predictive sending, where companies like ActiveCampaign can actually tell you based on your data when the best time to contact people is. And why I love this, and this is a subtle nuance, the way that most email tools work is they tell you on aggregate, meaning they look at their 5,000 customers and they tell you, of all these customers, we find that it's best to send at this time. What ActiveCampaign does is it analyzes your individual data and it says, of your customers who you've sent to for the last year or 2 years, here is the time that is driving the most engagement for you. So it's highly personalized. So you can lean in to things like predictive sending, to things like lead scoring, to get a better understanding of exactly what is performing the best for your customers so you can do more of that. The other thing that I think a lot of these tools are leaning more and more into, and something I think is really cool, is what I call omnichannel marketing. So this can mean a lot of different things, but in the case of ActiveCampaign, an example is we have a connection with a tool called Bonjoro, so you can send one-to-one personalized videos. We have another connection with a tool called Sendoso, so that you can actually send GIFs. We have another integration with a tool called Postalytics, so you can send physical cards. We have both a native functionality as well as a connection in with Twilio to send SMS. So the other thing is the way that we communicate with people is evolving and changing. And I encourage folks to ask their customers, how do you want to hear from me? Some people, if you have on your opt-in form, you have, would you like to get SMS text when there's specific deals or promos? Some people will click that, right? Some people will like, yeah, absolutely. Send me those promos. Other people won't. So you don't send it to them. I think asking people how they want to be communicated with, and then also thinking really hard about where are there those touch points where you can really add that extra delight experience. And again, I want to be full disclaimer. I used to work at Bonjoro, which is an integration partner, so I'm a big fan of what they do. But I think I love that idea of as we build all these systems, we still have that personalized touch. So like when someone opts in, first experience, first exposure to your brand, I love to use ActiveCampaign connected to Bonjoro so that I just get a ping on my phone and it says, hey, person X just signed up, and I can hop on and record them an actual live video, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, super quick. But that person is usually blown away and they're like, whoa, I didn't expect that. So this ability to communicate across multiple channels And to have all of those natively in one spot, every single one of those tools that I just mentioned are built in and native to ActiveCampaign, meaning that you don't need to use Zapier, you don't need to use any middleware. As long as you have Postalytics or Sendoso or Bonjoro, you can basically just connect that directly into your AC system. I think you're going to see more and more of a focus on omnichannel, and I think you're going to find that all these channels are going to continue to evolve. People think I'm crazy when I say in 10 years, email might just look completely different. The way that people talk and communicate might just look completely different. So you want to find systems that, in my opinion, have that forward-looking mentality and are not just wed to like, okay, I'm just going to try to send email as effectively as possible. It's about how do I create the best customer experience? And that's often multifaceted and involves that kind of omnichannel approach. So the two things that I really think about are how do you use intelligence? How do you use big data to basically help make some of those strategic decisions and serve up those better experiences? And then how do you do omnichannel? Those are two categories.
Love it. I just have a quick follow-up question because you talked about predictive sending, and in the social media space, we're very familiar with that. The tools like Orpulse and others have predictive
Mhm.
sending, where basically they're looking at when you have posted in the past, and of those posts, how they performed, and they're using that past data to predict what would perform well in the future. Is that how ActiveCampaign's email predictive sending work? In other words, am I going to have to test different days of the week and different times in order to actually generate that data, or does it work differently?
So it does work the way that you described. So it'll look at
Okay.
all the emails that you've sent out, both automations as well as one-off emails. And it will say, of all the emails you've sent off, we see these engagement patterns across those, and you're getting the most engagement with your audience at these times. So I think even people who, like, let's say you have a series of automations set up, those might be fairly consistent. But almost everyone that I've ever worked with who's using email also will do a one-off campaign. They have a new promotion coming up and they'll send something out. And those are very rarely always going to be at the same time. So we'll take that data and combine it with the performance of all your automation data to really isolate for your audience what is that best performing content. So, but the answer to your question also is yes, you'll need to feed some data in so that it essentially knows, just in the same way that AC can do forecasting, like sales forecasting. You'll need to feed some data into the CRM side so it kind of knows what those patterns are.
Terrific, terrific. Robin, you have any other questions?
No, I think it's really impactful, and I love the fact that you said 10 years from now, what is the email going to look like? If we are, as business owners, as other agencies, as everybody, look at it like anything that's trying to, I don't know if it's 10 years, Casey. It might be in 2 years. What do things look like? Because we're progressing so fast. We've seen all these changes in social, like Mike was saying, with it, like without Agorapulse, there's no way we could keep up with comments. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There are no days off. Social media doesn't care about holidays. You talk about email and how fast it's progressing. And I love that your company is so driven to basically being agile and innovative of how you're integrating all of these different systems. We don't know how we're going to be talking to each other in 2 years. I don't know about 10 years, but in 2 years, I mean, Apple Vision comes out, Apple Vision Pro, we're now looking at social, a new whole way. We weren't ready for that last year. And we're seeing just changes so quickly. And I think it's great how like you're going in there, you're really being personalization, you're integrating with so many other people, and you have these partnerships. When we talk about this, you have these ways of just, okay, if it's SMS or if it's this way, you're not segmenting it. And you also said that something that was really caught me again too, was like, hey, if this is your content, that's great. Sometimes we work in these isolated pillars. Like your social team doesn't talk to your marketing team. When it's a one-man show, you talk to or woman show, whatever. You talk to everybody. But when it starts segmenting, I love how you are so inclusive of like, hey, if it's SMS, I don't care. We might have sent it in an email and you follow up this. Marketing is marketing. And how your people want to be personalized to is that. And I think you have to meet everybody omnichannel where they're at. I love the text part. Like, send me a text, tell me there's a special today. I'm going to order it real quick. I'm not going to go through 97 emails. I'm going to do this at the end of the day, Love that. Love the personal.
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's spot on. I think communicating with people the way they want to be communicated with. And one other thing I would also just kind of bring into this conversation is, like, as we look forward, AI is obviously changing everything, and it's this buzzword and we're all talking about it. I think one thing that's really important, though, especially when we talk about email strategy, I'm sure this is something that you guys deal with on the content side, is I think people want to be really smart about using AI to enhance but not replace the core creative side of the process, right? that specific data, the specific things that you bring to the table are part of what differentiates and makes that content stand out. So if you're using this as a way to, maybe research, gather data points, there's so many amazing, powerful applications around AI. That's phenomenal. But don't have it be something where you just are like, hey, write this email for me in AI, and all your content is now AI written, and it's like this boilerplate, generic, uninteresting
Yes.
style of content. And one other thing I'll just say and encourage folks that are going through this and using ChatGPT and these other tools as part of the research project process, always ask for sources. I had a crazy experience recently, which I shared on social media, where I was asking ChatGPT about an ad campaign and about a pretty specific question on like, what is an example of a large ad campaign where when they turned it off, it had XY impacts on pipeline. And it goes, well, actually, we can tell you a story about HubSpot doing that. And I said, awesome, tell me all the details. And it told me when they launched the campaign, what it looked like, when they increased ad spend, when they turned off ad spend, very specific numbers, super in depth. Then I followed up and I said, can you provide a source for that? And it said, oh, that was a fictitious example. None of what I just said was true. And it did not preface. I went back. I was like, wait, did it say like this is an example? Nowhere in that response did it indicate that that was a fictitious example. And so I guarantee, as all these teams are now basically just like getting flooded with, oh, we can just use AI to write all of our stuff. If you're not asking for sources, if you're hiring people on your team who are writing AI content who aren't asking for sources, you are going to find that there is actually untrue information, untrue statistics that are being proliferated. And you don't want to have that be something that hurts your brand reputation. Trust is the most important commodity that you have, whether we're talking about social, whether we're talking about email strategy. That trust is fragile. They have so many options in the world. They have so many things they can follow. If you lie to someone and they see that, boom, you just tank all that trust that you built over the course of a year. So I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but I just want to encourage people because it's such a powerful tool, but you need to be smart with it and you need to use it the right way.
I always say AI will not replace you. Someone who uses AI and uses it correctly will replace you. I think a lot of business owners, like you just said, you said that they're having their teams use it, but unfortunately they're like, oh no, we're going to let go of our team and we're going to have one person do 7 people's jobs because they have AI now. And I'm like, you still have to go and make sure it's I'm going to date myself too. When the internet came out, yes, it helped you, but you have to make sure the sources are real. Like, let's go back to, I used to do my research papers in the library at college, before the interwebs came out. And yeah, you still have to go fact check things or you look like an idiot and you lose a reputation. It takes one time someone puts out something and it's a PR nightmare and you can't go back and take it back. We've watched companies destroy themselves with PR nightmare. And it is one person who's literally just like putting this AI information. Yep, it's a fictitious story. You quote it like it's gospel truth. There's a press release about it. And all of a sudden, you destroyed a company's years of hard work by that. And so I love that you said that. That's so important for all of us. And Mike and I see this all the time because they're like, just use AI, use AI. It's the freaking buzzword of the year. And I'm like, stop it. Stop using this word.
It's a buzzword, but it's also something that everyone needs to understand better
Yes.
how to use, which is why we're going to have so many more shows coming up that are focused very specifically on AI, Magi,
Mhm.
Cap Show, Supercharged Labs. So we're going to be talking about how to create video, how to create images, how to use it to create personas for your businesses, how to do really fun, interesting, powerful, and responsible things with AI. So I appreciate that you brought that up, Casey, because it's such an important topic. Casey, you have been absolutely amazing. This has been such a fun interview. I want you to tell folks where they can learn more about you and Active Campaign, where they can find and follow you.
Yeah, absolutely. So my major social channels on LinkedIn. So if people just type in Casey Hill, the one that works at Active Campaign, I post a lot of my kind of firsthand experiences, research, things that I'm testing out in my role. So if that's something you're interested in, email strategy, owned assets, organic growth, definitely encourage folks to reach out there. And if anyone wants to send me an email or has questions about Active Campaign specifically, my email is chill at activecampaign.com. And yes, everywhere I work, my email is always chill at, which is kind of amusing, but that's been the case for the last 10 years. Chill at wherever I work.
That's the best. And that's all we've got for today, friends. We'll have all of Casey's notes and links in the show notes. And don't forget to join the after party discussion in the Social Pulse community on Facebook, where you can learn more about today's guests, continue the conversation with other attendees, and even win prizes. Robin, any final thoughts from you?
No, this was a great. Thank you so much, Casey. We've really appreciated having you and learning so much from you.
Awesome.
Appreciate
Thanks,
you both.
everybody. Until next time. Thank you for listening to another episode of the MarTech Show, hosted by Robin Dimond and Mike Allton, powered by AgoraPulse, the #1 rated social media management solution, which you can learn more about at agorapulse.com. If you want to make sure you're part of our audience during live weekly broadcasts, take a look at our calendar at agorapulse.com/calendar, or click the subscribe button in your email once you register for any of these events. Is there a particular tool or topic you'd like to see us talk about? Or perhaps you think your solution should be featured? Email me at mike@agorapulse.com.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.